All right, strap yourselves in because today we're diving into some seriously mind-blowing stuff.
Oh, this is going to be good.
We're talking ancient aliens, biblical secrets, and a whole lot of what-ifs.
Sounds right up our alley.
We've got a transcribed discussion claiming the Bible's practically an alien chronicle, like straight-up evidence of extraterrestrial intervention.
Wow. Okay, I'm intrigued. Where do they even start with that?
It jumps right into some big names. The B'nai Elohim, the Nephilim.
I've heard of those.
Right. They say these are proof of aliens meddling in human affairs. And get this, they even tie in Noah's Ark.
They also are.
Yeah, like the whole flood story is part of this grand alien narrative.
That's a new one.
It's some next-level interpretation of stories we thought we knew. So where do we even begin with something like this?
Well, I think to understand their argument, we got to go back to the sources' take on the book of Genesis.
Yeah.
They're saying certain figures and events, like the B'nai Elohim interacting with humans, are proof of alien contact.
Okay, so not just a friendly hello from across the cosmos, but actual, like, interactions.
Right. And they connect this to the Nephilim, those often described as giants.
Oh, yeah, the giant.
They believe those are a result of this alien-human mingling.
Whoa, hold on. So they're saying there was interbreeding going on. Talk about a family reunion you wouldn't want to attend.
Yeah, it's a pretty bold claim.
It is. But let's entertain this idea for a second. Why would advanced beings want to mix their DNA with ours? What's the motivation there?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
The source suggests that maybe these B'nai Elohim were obsessed with genetic experimentation.
Genetic experimentation.
Yeah, like they were trying to shape human evolution.
So not just a casual visit, but a full-on lab experiment.
That's what they're suggesting. They point to the diversity of life on Earth and even mythical creatures like centaurs and mermaids as evidence.
Centaurs and mermaids, huh? Now that's where my skepticism kicks in.
Yeah, it requires a pretty big leap of faith.
I mean, we're talking about ancient times here. They didn't exactly leave behind lab reports. How feasible is it that beings from back then, even if they were aliens, had the tech for that kind of genetic manipulation?
That's a great point. Even today, with all our advancements, manipulating DNA to create new species is incredibly complex. To claim that ancient beings could do this, yeah, it's a stretch. And the source doesn't really address that.
Okay, but let's say, for argument's sake, they were capable of it. What's the why? What would be the point of creating these hybrid creatures or influencing human evolution?
Well, the source paints these B'nai Elohim as beings who are really, really hungry for power.
Power-hungry aliens, huh? That's a familiar trope.
Yeah, it is. And interestingly, they also craved worship.
Worship, like they wanted humans to bow down to them.
Exactly. They wanted to be seen as gods.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating angle to consider, even if you're not buying the whole alien thing.
Yeah. The whole worship me thing is a pretty common theme in ancient mythology. But you'd think if they were advanced enough to travel the cosmos and mess with DNA, they wouldn't need validation from us.
You'd think so, right?
So let's move on to another big claim from this discussion, the flood.
Oh yeah, the big one.
This source is saying it wasn't just some natural disaster, but a deliberate reset button pushed by those same B'nai Elohim. Why? Why go to such extremes?
Well, their reasoning gets pretty dark. They say the world had become corrupted by all these genetic experiments, and the flood was essentially a way to clean up their mess.
Like they created a problem they couldn't control and just hit the reset button.
Exactly. It paints a pretty grim picture of these beings.
Let's talk about irresponsible lab practices. But let's think about this flood idea for a second. Almost every culture has a flood myth. Could that be evidence that something catastrophic happened on a global scale, even if it wasn't aliens wiping out their science project?
That's where things get really interesting. We know major flooding events have occurred throughout history. It's definitely possible these myths have roots in real-world events, maybe exaggerated over time. But attributing them to alien intervention, that's a big jump without concrete evidence.
Okay, so we've got genetic manipulation, a cosmic reset button, power-hungry aliens seeking worship. What else does this source throw at us?
Well, this is where they dive into the book of Enoch. It's not part of the standard Bible, but gives a much more detailed account of these watchers, the beings who supposedly came down to Earth.
Okay, we're going deeper down the rabbit hole now. Fill me in on this book of Enoch. What's so special about it, and how does it tie into the whole alien narrative?
Well, the book of Enoch, it expands on the idea of fallen angels, claiming they shared forbidden knowledge with humans.
Forbidden knowledge, huh? Sounds juicy.
They even go into detail about these watchers teaching humans things like astronomy and metallurgy. The source uses this to suggest that these weren't divine beings, but aliens sharing their advanced technology.
So it's like, forget divine inspiration, it was all alien tech support. But that raises an interesting question. If these watchers were so eager to share their knowledge, why the whole fallen angel label? What went wrong?
That's a great question. And to be honest, one, the source doesn't really answer. The Book of Enoch itself is very complex, open to a lot of interpretation. But it does highlight this idea that this knowledge came with a price,
Yeah.
that it corrupted humanity or led us astray somehow.
Okay, so we've got a power struggle, forbidden knowledge, and some serious consequences. Sounds like the setup for a cosmic drama.
It definitely does. And this is just the beginning. We're about to delve into how this source connects these ideas to the Tower of Babel and the lineage of Noah's sons.
Oh man, the plot thickens. I'm ready for more. Hit me with it.
Okay, so we've established that this source sees a lot of biblical events through this lens of alien intervention. And they kind of take it a step further by connecting it to the Tower of Babel.
Oh, yes. The Tower of Babel. Humanity tries to build this tower to reach heaven, ends up with a bunch of different languages and scattered across the globe.
Right.
It's always felt like a story about ambition, and the consequences of reaching too far. How does this source tie it into the alien narrative?
Well, they suggest that the Tower of Babel wasn't just a physical structure, but like a symbol of humanity, trying to reclaim that knowledge and power that the Watchers supposedly shared.
So humans were trying to break free from their cosmic overlords.
That's how they see it.
It's like a sci-fi rebellion story, but with ancient tools instead of laser blasters.
Exactly, and the scattering of languages. They see that as a deliberate act, like by the B'nai Elohim to divide and conquer.
To prevent humans from uniting and challenging their authority. Okay, so we've got genetic manipulation, a flood, a forbidden knowledge power struggle, and now a cosmic rebellion. This is getting pretty epic. But hold on a sec. Let's rewind to the flood again. The source claims it was this global reset, but then they talk about the Tower of Babel happening afterward. Doesn't that create a bit of a timeline issue?
You're right. The biblical timeline places the Tower of Babel after the flood.
Right.
But remember, this source is presenting their own interpretation. They're weaving a narrative that fits their theory, even if it means rearranging the established chronology a bit.
So it's like they're piecing together their own version of history using the Bible as a framework?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, let's go with their flow for a minute. What happens after this supposed rebellion at the Tower of Babel?
Well, this is where they bring in the lineage of Noah's sons. Specifically, they focus on Shem.
Shem.
Yeah, the ancestor of the Semitic people, from whom, according to the Bible, Abraham and eventually the Israelites descended.
So they're linking this whole alien intervention story to the origins of Judaism.
They are.
Okay.
And they take it even further by drawing parallels to ancient Mesopotamian myths, like the Epic of Gilgamesh.
The Epic of Gilgamesh.
Which also has a flood narrative and powerful gods.
Oh, interesting.
They're trying to build a case for a shared historical memory of these events, suggesting that the Bible is just one version of a much larger story.
Like the Bible's a piece of a cosmic puzzle and these other myths are the missing pieces. I've got to admit, even if I'm not convinced about the aliens, it's a pretty compelling narrative. Makes you wonder if we've been looking at these ancient texts too narrowly.
Right. That's the beauty of exploring these alternative interpretations. They challenge us to question what we think we know and consider possibilities we might not have thought of before.
But it's also important to remember we're dealing with interpretations, not hard facts.
Of course, of course.
Right. Let's dive back into this source's claims about the Anunnaki and their motivations. They seem pretty convinced that these beings weren't friendly visitors, but power-hungry exploiters. What's their evidence for this?
Well, they focus on the fact that these B'nai Elohim, or Anunnaki as they call them, constantly demand worship and obedience from humans.
Right. It's like that's their main thing.
And they suggest this need for veneration. It goes beyond just wanting respect.
Yeah.
It's about control and manipulation. They even claim that these beings wanted to enslave humanity, using their advanced technology to force humans to mine resources for them.
So these aliens were like ancient intergalactic colonizers coming to plunder Earth for their own gain.
That's the picture they're painting. They even use terms like exploitation and domination to describe the Anunnaki's relationship with humans. It's really interesting how they connect this ancient narrative to modern concerns about like resource depletion and environmental destruction.
Almost like these ancient stories are warnings from the past about the consequences of greed and power.
Exactly.
Okay, but are they providing any actual proof for these claims, or is this all just speculation?
That's the thing. A lot of their argument relies on reinterpreting biblical passages and connecting ancient myths.
Right.
They don't really offer any concrete archaeological or scientific evidence. It's more about presenting a new way of looking at these old stories.
So they're saying, hey, if you look at these texts through this specific lens, you get a whole new narrative, which I gotta admit is a pretty clever approach.
It is.
But without hard evidence, it's tough to know how much weight to give to their interpretation.
Yeah, I agree. It's up to each person to decide how much they buy into this theory.
Right.
But even if we're skeptical, there are some thought-provoking questions that come out of this discussion.
Absolutely. Like, if there were these advanced beings visiting Earth in the past, why did they leave? And what would that mean for our understanding of history and our place in the universe?
Big questions.
Big questions.
Questions philosophers and scientists have been grappling with forever.
Yeah.
And this source, whether they meant to or not, makes us confront these questions head-on.
Okay, so we've got genetic experiments, a flood that resets everything, a rebellion against these cosmic overlords, and some unsettling parallels to our modern-day struggles with power and greed. Where do we even go from here?
Well, this is where the source gets really specific about those alleged genetic experiments. They say the Anunnaki weren't just messing with human DNA, they were creating all kinds of hybrid creatures,
Hybrid.
mixing human and animal traits.
Hmm.
They describe a world with giants, centaurs, mermaids, all sorts of fantastical beings.
Wait, are they saying Noah's Ark was like a cosmic zoo filled with hybrid creatures? I was not prepared for that visual.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
But seriously, how do they reconcile these outlandish claims with, actual fossil evidence? We haven't exactly found centaur skeletons running around.
That's a valid point, and you're right. There's no scientific evidence to back up the existence of these creatures. The source seems to kind of gloss over this lack of evidence.
So are they saying we should take these claims literally, or is there some deeper meaning behind these stories?
It's not really clear. It's almost like they're throwing these ideas out there without really exploring the implications, or addressing the scientific inconsistencies.
It's like they're more focused on building a narrative than proving anything.
Yeah, you could say that.
But even if we take the hybrid creatures out of the equation, there's still that question of their obsession with genetic manipulation.
Right.
Why mess with our DNA?
Well, they offer a few explanations. One is that maybe they were trying to improve humanity in some way.
Upgrade us, you mean?
Yeah, like an upgrade. Another is that they were looking for specific genetic traits or abilities that they could exploit. And then there's the more sinister possibility that they were just experimenting, playing God with human life for their own amusement or scientific curiosity.
Benevolent geneticists or cruel cosmic overlords, it seems like they're leaving a lot of room for interpretation.
They are. And that's where our critical thinking comes in. We have to weigh the evidence, consider the biases, and ultimately decide for ourselves how much we believe.
Fair enough. But let's get back to the source. They seem really fixated on Genesis 6, that passage about the sons of God taking human wives.
Yes. And they interpret it as a literal account of alien-human interbreeding.
Whoa.
They claim those sons of God were the Anunnaki and their offspring were the Nephilim, the giants mentioned in the Bible.
So they're saying the Bible's basically confirming their theory.
That's their argument. It's definitely not a mainstream interpretation.
No, it's not. But even if we entertain this idea for a second, there are still unanswered questions like, why would advanced aliens need to resort to interbreeding? Couldn't they have just, engineered a virus or something if they wanted to wipe out humanity?
You're right, that's a good point. It's something they don't really explain. Their thinking seems to be that these B'nai Elohim, they were just fascinated with human DNA. Maybe they needed something from us, something they couldn't make themselves.
So humans were the ultimate prize all along. That's either flattering or terrifying, I can't decide which. But it definitely makes this whole thing even more unsettling.
Definitely. Raises the stakes, too. If these beings were so into our DNA, what does that mean for us? Are we just pawns in their cosmic game?
Yeah, that's a scary thought. But let's keep digging into this source material. What else do they say about the Anunnaki and their supposed manipulation of humanity?
Well, they start connecting their theory to Specific ancient myths and archaeological findings. They point to stories of giant skeletons being found all over the world, claiming these are the remains of the Nephilim.
Oh, the giant skeletons. I've seen documentaries about those. But aren't most of those claims debunked?
Yeah, you're right. Most of them have been proven to be hoaxes or misinterpretations. But the source insists that there's a cover-up, that the real evidence is being suppressed.
Ah, the classic conspiracy theory angle.
Exactly. It's a way to dismiss any evidence that doesn't fit their narrative. But to be fair, they do bring up some interesting points about the archaeological record being, incomplete and open to different interpretations.
So they acknowledge there are gaps in our knowledge, but then use those gaps to insert their own story. Clever, but not necessarily convincing.
I agree. It's like they're saying, we don't know everything, so anything is possible. Which, yeah, it's technically true, but it doesn't automatically validate their claims.
So how do we navigate this slippery slope of interpretation and speculation? How do we know what's real and what's not when we're talking about ancient mysteries?
And that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It requires critical thinking, careful research, and a willingness to question everything.
I'm starting to think this deep dive is less about finding answers and more about asking the right questions.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's about expanding our understanding and considering possibilities we might not have thought of before.
Okay, so we've explored their claims about genetic manipulation, hybrid creatures, and this global flood. What else does this source offer as evidence for their theory?
Well, this is where they get into ancient symbolism and esoteric interpretations. They claim a lot of ancient structures, like pyramids and megalithic sites, were actually built with help from advanced alien tech.
Okay, hold on. Ancient aliens as master architects. That's a big jump.
It is. And it's an idea that's been really popularized by those ancient astronaut documentaries.
Oh, yeah, those.
But most archaeologists and historians don't buy it. They explain those structures through human ingenuity and hard work.
Right, pyramids weren't built in a day, but they were built by humans.
Yeah.
But I get it. It's tempting to look at these ancient wonders and imagine a more fantastical explanation.
It is. There's something really appealing about the idea that we had help from a more advanced civilization. But again, we have to weigh the evidence before jumping to conclusions.
Okay, so we've got the pyramids, giant skeletons, biblical passages, all supposedly pointing to this alien intervention theory. What else is there?
Well, now they connect their theory to ancient myths and legends from all over the world. Stories of gods coming down from the sky, flying chariots, strange beings with advanced knowledge. They claim these are not just myths, but memories of real encounters with aliens.
It's like they're saying, hey, everyone has a story about aliens. There's got to be something to it.
Right. They're tapping into that universal fascination with the unknown, the possibility that we're not alone, and they're using those myths as evidence.
Okay, but haven't those myths been interpreted in lots of different ways? Couldn't they be symbolic or metaphorical?
Definitely. And that's where things get murky. It's tempting to take those stories literally, to see them as factual accounts, but we have to remember they were passed down through generations, often orally, and probably changed along the way.
So are those myths completely useless as evidence? Or can we learn something from them even if we don't take them at face value?
I think there's a middle ground. We can't just dismiss them. They offer a glimpse into the beliefs and fears of ancient cultures.
Right.
But we also can't read too much into them or impose our own interpretations.
So it's about finding that balance between respecting the past and acknowledging the limits of what we know. It's about recognizing that we might never have all the answers, but we should never stop asking questions.
Exactly. And I think that's the key takeaway from this whole deep dive. It's not about proving or disproving aliens. It's about expanding our minds and considering new possibilities.
I like that. It's about the journey, not the destination. And who knows, maybe along the way, we'll find some unexpected truths.
That's the beauty of exploration. You never know what you might discover.
So after all that, where do we land? Should we be, looking up at the sky, wondering when our alien overlords are coming back?
Not necessarily. I think curiosity is a better approach than suspicion. What's really interesting is how these ideas, even if we don't buy into them completely, make us rethink our place in the universe. Like, what if there's more to the story than we've been told?
Right. What if those ancient myths are like distorted echoes of real events? Maybe something happened, something profound, but the stories got twisted over time.
Exactly. I think that's what's so valuable about these deep dives. It's not about proving or disproving aliens. It's about pushing the boundaries of our imagination, questioning what we think we know.
So it's more about the mystery than finding concrete
I
answers.
think so. And maybe even appreciating those stories we tell ourselves about our origins, our purpose, the forces that shape the world.
It seems like people are drawn to these theories because they offer a sense of wonder, of possibility. Like in a world that can feel pretty ordinary, the idea of ancient aliens walking among us, well, that's just too cool to ignore.
It is. And there's something really appealing about the idea that we're not alone, that maybe other intelligent beings have been here, maybe even influenced us somehow.
But as we talked about, we got to approach these claims with a healthy dose of skepticism. We can't just believe everything we hear, right?
Absolutely. Critical thinking is so important, especially with these topics. We need to ask those tough questions, challenge the usual explanations, consider different perspectives.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Genetic manipulation, hybrid creatures, a flood that resets the world, rebelling against alien overlords. What a wild ride. But as we wrap up, I want to bring it back to you, the listener. What are you taking away from this?
I'd say keep an open mind, but don't check your critical thinking at the door. Explore those alternative theories. Dig into those ancient texts and myths. Question everything. But ground your exploration in logic, evidence, and a good dose of skepticism.
That's great advice. And that goes for anything that sparks your curiosity, not just ancient aliens. Ask questions, challenge the status quo, look for new perspectives. You never know what you might discover.
And remember, even if we never find proof of alien intervention, just exploring these ideas can be so enriching. It can change how we see history, our connection to the cosmos, even our place in the universe.
I love that. Well said. Well, folks, it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep looking up at the stars. You never know what mysteries are out there waiting to be uncovered.